to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. A recent tweet by way of veteran boxing scribe, who recently sat down and spoke to Naoya Inoue, who said, "I'm planning on fighting 3 times this year. I'm sure these 3 fights will take place at super bantamweight, probably in May, September, and December, barring illness or injury. When to move up to featherweight will depend on how I and my body feel next year." Inoue has been averaging about 2 fights a year. He wants to bump that up to 3 this year. He's been averaging 2 fights a year for the last 3 years or so, and 3 fights in a single calendar year is 3 fights on the calendar for Top Rank and ESPN. That's important. 3 fights they don't have to pay for if they're in Japan, because if they're in Japan, then it's Ohashi at the helm of promotion, not Top Rank. Fights themselves would be happening on Ohashi's dime, not Top Rank, though where Top Rank comes into it is they are able to deliver that content to an American audience and their broadcast partner because they co-promote Naoya Inoue. So you get the content minus the bill. What is a cost-effective method of continuing to deliver boxing to the boxing fans whilst being fiscally responsible.
We saw the PBC try their hand at this last year with Tim Tszú's fights that were happening in Australia, but by then it was too late for them, and the people at Paramount had made up their mind. They weren't going to be spending any more money on boxing content.
Whereas Top Rank has been at it a while longer. It's not unusual for Top Rank, via their affiliations and relationships, to bring you boxing matches anywhere from the United Kingdom to Australia to Japan, based on what fighters they promote. So when Michaela Mayer, for example, travels to Liverpool to headline a boxer show, when an Odd to a Better Beef travels to London to box an Anthony Yard, Top Rank is able to provide that content to their broadcast partner and the boxing fans at virtually no expense to them because it's not actually their show. They're not on the hook for it, whether it's a success or a failure.
It's smart. It's clever, and in this business, you have to be.
So when Naoya Inoue is set to fight 3 times in a single calendar year on Ohashi's dime and not Top Rank's, you can take that money you're saving from your annual budget and dedicate it to doing other fights.
Since you didn't have to spend it doing fights for Inoue, you can use it on something else to make some other fights.
Smart business is what it is. Smart business on the part of Top Rank and smart business on the part of Inoue, the fighter, who's very popular right now, and you want to optimize that. Boxers, in a very general sense, and competing at the highest levels, have a very short shelf life. So you want to make as much money as you can, while you're popular, while people in Japan and America are talking about you. And you see the rate at which these fights are scheduled for Inoue, one after the other.
It take them long to move on from the big win over Stephen Fulton to the big win over Marlon Tapales, and now they're supposed to be fighting Luis Neri with few lulls in between.
The other 2 guys he intends to fight later on this year, I'm gonna assume it's MJ Akhmadaliev and Sam Goodman. What are his other mandatory challengers alongside Luis Neri now that he is this division's undisputed champion? His business practices striking while the iron is hot, while Inoue is popular and his star is rising, keeping him busy, keeping him active, keeping him out there, keeping people talking about him. The stark contrast in how we see his career is handled and how some Americans' careers are handled. What are supposed to be popular fighters.
Gervonta Davis last saw action in April of last year, I believe it was.
Whereas Inoue saw action the following month in May, then again in December. Now he's supposed to be returning to action very soon, opposite the ring Luis Neri, all before Gervonta Davis has even made an announcement.
An official announcement in reference to who he's going to be fighting. It could very well have been a year's time in between Gervonta's last fight and his next fight. And don't kid yourself. I don't think for a second he's going to do over 1 million buys in his next fight like he did in his last fight.
The numbers are going to nosedive in tandem with the amount of time he spent away and whoever it is he's going to be fighting. He's going to lose some steam, whereas Inoue, his star is rising. Part of that conversation is the offering. The offering you get as a boxing fan from ESPN Plus versus the offering you get from Amazon Prime.
What offering from Amazon Prime? They only have one fight on the schedule, and it's a pay-per-view.
Top Rank has already done several and announced several shows, all non-pay-per-view. We already saw Artur Beterbiev versus Callum Smith, Michaela Mayer versus Natasha Jonas,
Taraji versus Canizales.
This week we're seeing Lopez versus Ortiz. They've already announced Oscar Valdez versus Liam Wilson.
Currently finalizing Emmanuel Navarrete versus Denis Berenchik.
Cards in Japan like Nakatani versus Santiago, as well as Inoue's fights. 3 of them, if he's able to keep this schedule.
These are not pay-per-views. They don't come at any additional charge. You get all of this as part of your ESPN Plus subscription versus the paltry offering from PBC on Prime.
A lone pay-per-view that is, in fact, more expensive than 6 or 7 months of ESPN Plus. Stark contrast in how these two boxing outfits do business. I guess that's the difference between how actual business people do business and how
Al Heyman ain't nothing but a music guy cosplaying a boxing guy. That's why there's nothing sustainable about how he does business.
In any event, if Naoya Inoue plans on fighting 3 times this year, I ain't complaining. It's more value for money to the consumer and more boxing for the boxing fan.
Romero is coming off a really bad back injury, you know, and he has a lot of problems there. You guys probably didn't know about that, huh? Well, I did. Shit, I know a lot of shit. It's time to expose everybody. Fuck them. So, you know, my whole thing is that, you know, he got a lot of back problems, a lot of neck problems. Maybe Pitbull could take advantage of that when they face each other. Whoever did the banner, though, it should just be Romero versus Cruz. I don't think it should be called Rolly versus Pitbull. It doesn't make sense, but hey, I'm not on that side. We're on this side over here. So, you know, I wish nothing but the best for these guys. Everyone's coming to 140 for a reason because Teofimo X'd out the big king, the big guy. That was Josh Taylor. Now everybody want to come to 140.
Teofimo Lopez has been in full villain mode the last couple of days in the buildup of this upcoming Thursday's fight. And a lot of it, you know, what it really is him just selling himself and playing that role, playing that character, that bad guy, to draw attention to himself and draw attention to his fight, which is understandable in this business. But when you start going after people that you used to be friends with, you know, he kind of threw Rolly Romero under the bus there.
Aren't they buddies?
When you take shots at a Devin Haney or a Terrence Crawford, when you tear them down, it's just a part of the business. You weren't friends with those guys anyway, but with Rolly, unless I'm mistaken, these guys used to be pals. They used to be friends, and he threw him under the bus, letting the world know that Rolly Romero is going into this fight with Isaac Pitbull Cruz with back and neck issues, back and neck problems.
I already had Isaac beating him.
Before Teofimo's revelation that Rolly could be going into this fight with some issues, with some problems, I already had Isaac Pitbull Cruz beating Rolly Romero. Rolly's no good. Rolly sucks.
But it's telling that ahead of his own fight with Jermaine Ortiz, Teofimo Lopez willfully decides to throw his old buddy under the bus.
Why would he do that if he doesn't have to? I've developed a personality profile when it comes to Teofimo Lopez, and whenever the pressure is on, he starts lashing out at everybody. He starts taking shots at everybody, kind of like when he falters and he's embarrassed, he blames everybody. He lost to George Kambosos, and he's blaming Eddie Hearn, he's blaming Matchroom, he says they set him up.
And before that, he was taking shots at Top Rank.
Only so that as soon as things go sideways, as a result of his own actions, his own doing, him dragging out that George Kambosos situation, he starts taking shots at Matchroom, he starts taking shots at them, taking shots at Eddie.
He does that a lot.
Take shots at everybody. The other day we were talking about how he was taking shots at Terrence Crawford. He's now taking shots at Rolly Romero, and this is in the buildup of his own fight with Jermaine Ortiz. You get the sense that what this could be is a byproduct of the jitters. Maybe he's nervous, a bit of performance anxiety. He's on edge, and this is how it manifests in the media. He starts attacking everybody because he's in fight or flight mode.
He's on edge.
What characterizes it is that he's willfully taking shots at a guy that he used to be friends with, a guy who, in all likelihood, he's not going to make it past Isaac Cruz anyway, thus taking shots at him is unnecessary. Teofimo willfully throws him under the bus.
And I'm not complaining about it. If he wants to take shots at the guy, he can take shots at the guy. This is the hurt business.
He's taking shots at him now, where he wasn't taking shots at him before. There has to be a reason for that, because they were both campaigning at the same weight at 135. Now they're both at 140, but now, unlike then, now he's taking shots at the guy.
He wasn't doing that before.
He's doing it now. And it's because I think Teofimo Lopez, whenever the pressure is on, he starts to feel like the entire world is against him. Thus, he lashes out at the entire world, at Eddie Hearn, at Terrence Crawford, at Rolly Romero, whoever's around, whoever comes to mind.
He's in fight or flight mode.
It's like everyone has went soft on the internet. Social media really made a lot of these boxers soft because they say, well, I don't really need to fight nobody. I just got to say their name. Subriel Matias, no one knew about him until he started calling me out. It's just due to facts. You know, he could be an IBF world champion, but he's the most softest fighter in the division. Why I say that? Because he's one-dimensional to the point where Puerto Ricans, man, I tear they butt up. Puerto Ricans are easy to beat, and I don't care if the Puerto Ricans feel some type of way.
As stated, Teofimo Lopez, ahead of this Thursday's fight, is in full villain mode, taking shots at Puerto Rican fighters. One Puerto Rican fighter in particular, IBF super lightweight champion Subriel Matias, who's been calling him out. Subriel Matias, who's in the process of migrating from the PBC over to Matchroom in order to do a homecoming fight as his very first fight under the Matchroom banner. Fight in Puerto Rico, opposite the ring Australia's own Liam Paro, which we talked about. A fight that could go a long way with the Puerto Rican fans.
Had high hopes for Edgar Berlanga, that he could become the next face of Puerto Rican boxing, the male face of Puerto Rican boxing. But Edgar, he just doesn't have the ceiling. He doesn't have the talent. And some are still holding out hope that perhaps Xander Zayas can fill that role. But Xander, as talented as he is, he's young and he's not yet the finished product. Whereas Subriel, he's there. He's a world champion and he's a knockout machine.
He's made for TV, a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, volume puncher with bad intentions. Very, very bad intentions.
But in Teofimo's opinion, the softest world champion at 140 pounds, a guy who only came into the public eye because he started calling him out.
It's like everyone has went soft on the internet. Social media really made a lot of these boxers soft because they say, well, I don't really need to fight nobody. I just got to say their name. Subriel Matias, no one knew about him until he started calling me out. It's just due to facts. You know, he could be an IBF world champion, but he's the most softest fighter in the division. Why I say that? Because he's one-dimensional to the point where Puerto Ricans, man, I tear they butt up. Puerto Ricans are easy to beat, and I don't care if the Puerto Ricans feel some type of way.
Teofimo Lopez knows exactly what he's doing. While he's saying this, he's trying to rile up the Puerto Rican fans a la Bernard Hopkins in the buildup of what was the Felix Trinidad fight many, many years ago. Bernard, he knew what he was doing. He wanted to rile up the Puerto Rican fans. He went as far as throwing the Puerto Rican flag on the ground and stepping on it in front of a lot of Puerto Ricans who were not happy.
Teofimo Lopez's recent rant about Puerto Rican fighters, one Puerto Rican fighter in particular, his recent rant seems like an homage to that.
But is it the way that Teofimo Lopez says it is? Is the only reason people are talking about Subriel because Subriel started calling out Teofimo? And no, it's not the situation. That's not the case. In fact, most people came to know Subriel Matias due to something completely unrelated to Teofimo, the unfortunate death of Maxim Dadashev at Subriel Matias's hands, in tandem with his fan-friendly style, his knockout percentage.
Teofimo says he's soft, and Teofimo says he's one-dimensional.
I don't think there's anything soft about Subriel Matias, who strikes me as a no-nonsense customer and a downright cold-blooded killer. That's what he strikes me as. I don't think there's anything soft, warm, or cuddly about this fighter. I don't. And
he says he's one-dimensional.
I do agree with that. Strange as this might sound, I do agree that Subriel Matias, he is a one-dimensional fighter, the way most pressure fighters are often one-dimensional. You know exactly what they want to do. You know exactly how they're going to do it. In that way, he is one-dimensional, but that doesn't mean he's easy.
Not for a guy who got sat on his back pocket by a non-puncher in George Kambosos, 2 times by another non-puncher in Sandor Martin. Those guys are not known for power.
Nope.
Those guys aren't knockout merchants or knockdown merchants. Those guys put Teofimo on his ass. So if they could put Teofimo on his ass, what would Subriel do to him?
You will have heard me say this before, that I think Teofimo, a boxer puncher, a counter puncher, he's got the right base style for Subriel. He's got the right base style for a pressure fighter, but I don't know if he's durable enough, physically durable enough to endure what punches get in, because it's a 12-round fight, 36 minutes. That's a long time to be in the ring with Subriel Matias.
Alguien cercano a Teófimo, sácale en eso a ver qué le va a decir. A ver si puedo obviar la situación, el caripelado ese. De hecho, le voy a enviar un mensaje.
Dale.
De hecho, te voy a noquear, cabrón. Este puertorriqueño te va a noquear y el mundo se va a reír de ti. Vas a terminar en un psicólogo. Vas a ver, te voy a noquear.
A ver, ya está, a ver, 53,14. Eso yo lo pico y se lo envío a Galdi. A Galdi
Subriel Matias is not taking Teofimo Lopez's chatter lying down. He says this is one Puerto Rican that will knock you out, that will embarrass you, and people are going to laugh, and you're going to need a therapist. Recently sat down with Contragolpeo, which translated into English means counterpunch, a channel here on YouTube, detailing how top-ranked negotiations didn't work out because they wouldn't guarantee him a Lopez fight after a Steve Claggett fight. The PBC was offering him a Montestanionis and Jaron Boots Ennis, two welterweights, where his promoter wanted Rolly Romero or Gervonta Davis. Obviously on the premise that Rolly is a champion at the same weight as him, and Gervonta Davis, he's fought at 140 pounds at least once.
Yet another example of how hapless the people at the PBC really are, because here you have a fighter of Puerto Rican descent who could be your gateway into those Puerto Rican wallets, and what do you want to do? You want to move him up from 140 up to 147 to fight two nobodies, two welterweights. Why don't you just have them fight each other?
Why don't you just have a Montestanionis fight Jaron Boots Ennis, and if a Montestanionis doesn't want to do it, where is Mario Barrios? What about him? Why don't you have your welterweights fight your welterweights and your junior welterweights fight your junior welterweights? What the fuck are you thinking?
I told you those guys over there don't know what they're doing.
Subriel Matias is made for television. He's an action fighter, he's a knockout machine, and he's a knockout machine of Puerto Rican descent that could grant you access to all those Puerto Rican fans and their Puerto Rican wallets. And you don't know what to do with him, where Eddie Hearn, he knows exactly what to do. Give him a homecoming fight in Puerto Rico. Let him endear himself to those Puerto Rican fans with a highlight reel knockout.
Him versus Lopez could be big, and I mean big, in New York City.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, he's got to get past Liam Bottle first.